So I'm here with my dear friend and colleague, Rebecca, and she is going to share her thoughts and ideas with us on how we can make this better, a better world for all. Rebecca is director of the resilience team at ESDAC. She'll give us more information about what ESDAC does. She has fought poverty and has walked with families and works within schools. And she sees poverty as the main driver for most social problems. So her mission is to get people out of poverty, works with kids, parents, educators, and communities to do just that, as well as providing trauma-informed restorative justice principles to them as their tool belt. So with that said, Rebecca, thank you so much for being here with us. And you gave me a quote that I'd love for you to share with us and then launch into whatever it is that comes to mind.
James, I kind of had a stirred up morning. And so just sitting here with you and listening to your voice, and there's always just such a sweet space when you and I share time. And so I'm just feeling really grateful in this moment for that. A quote that, and I kind of paraphrased it a little bit, but that really has stood out in my life, and especially in my early days of coming to the table with folks that were trying to figure out what I needed, what my kids needed, because we were in the trailer park and struggling. And, the quote says, "If you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you see my struggle as intertwined with your survival, then let us work together." And that's by Lila Watson. And I just think that really speaks to how we show up with people. And this propensity in the world to want to fix and solve. And we're very outcome driven. We want the evidence-based and kind of the academia approach and the prescriptions. And but relationships are what heals and transforms lives and stories and communities. And, if we're showing up to try and fix somebody, we're really wasting their time and our own. That's not what people need. It's not what they want. And it really is at times offensive to those that are experiencing some sort of turmoil. There's kind of this idea that folks in poverty kind of need to show up with their head down and their hand out, and they should be grateful. And so I just, James, in the work that I've got to do in the last several years is really because of the way the table was set for me. When me and my kids were in the trailer park, I didn't get out of poverty until, deep generational poverty, until I was 40 years old. And so I know all about it. And, as we think about trauma and poverty and communities and ecosystems, and helping people find the lives that they deserve, as long as we stay grounded and rooted in relationships and honor and curiosity and showing up with, hey, tell me what you need to know about what I need to know about what's going on. And what do you guys think we should do? I've just kind of built all of my work off of the idea that the people closest to the problem, James, are the ones that have the solutions. And so oftentimes we're not asking we're going in and kind of telling and outlining, and people are standing outside a couple of spaces removed, kind of scratching their head, and there's a drawing board, right? And we're kind of designing these pieces, but we don't have the folks that are experiencing the issues at the table to co-create with us. And so, how do we do that? And how do we start to recognize and understand that when we come into that idea that, oh, let's set the table, let's bring folks that are experiencing the issues to the table to solve the problems with us, and we just become these curators of, helping to identify resources and remove barriers for people, for groups. How do we do that? Typically what I have found, James, is that there's this uncomfortable space of, yeah, that sounds great in theory, but we don't really know how to spend time with folks that aren't like us. We get this kind of weird feeling when we think about getting into authentic relationships of shared power with people who aren't like us, right? And so I just always think that's where you start, right? You start in that uncomfortable space. And you probably, if you're working with a group or an organization, and that really is how you want to start showing up, you're probably going to have to do some kind of culture work around how you show up authentically, how you show up curious, how you understand that it's not going to be this grand romance, that there's going to be bumps, bruises, Band-Aids, you know what I mean? And so, but once you get there in that space and you start to authentically engage and connect with human beings that are not like you, incredible solutions are captured and created. And more importantly, everybody involved, folks that have shown up to help and folks that who are receiving help, all of a sudden you realize all of us are looking for something. And all of us are contributing to what each other needs. And this other story starts to take place. And that's kind of what I've built my work around in communities, is creating that space for people where the helpers are like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm really helping in this situation, but I'm getting so much out of it. Right? Anyways, that's a long kind of thought process off of.
Where you took me, Rebecca, I just spent a week at the Living School, and one of my teachers, Cynthia Bujob, talked about the power of three, which is the Trinity. And so you have this, what she calls an affirming force, and then a denying force. And you have this conflict. And then you have this resolving force. So it takes the three of them to move us forward. And you just talked about, and I'd like you to go deeper into, so right now you're doing a lot of work with schools, and you have COVID, right? Which, if we see COVID as the denying force, right? Because you're talking about the importance of relationship, right? And so you have COVID, and then you have what I call, which people kind of, everybody understands this word differently, and I think misunderstands it, but you have love. So you have the denying force of COVID and the affirming force of love. And then the resolution piece is, I think, something you're talking about, which is, as these two come together, you just trust that you've created a space where the magic, where this thing that you don't know, your imagination steps in, your vulnerability steps in, your creativity steps in, and something happens. Are you?
Yeah, that's that chemistry, James.
So talk to me a little bit about how you're experiencing that right now as you step into these spaces and bring yourself.
Yeah. So I've been doing a lot of work virtually, which we're figuring out how to do that. And I think what is really exciting, there's some hard parts about that. Most of us who kind of do ministry or training, facilitate groups, we like being with people. We like being in big spaces where lots of energy is happening. And so it's very different online, but it's not over. And so I've been able to be a part of creating some really sweet spaces for hundreds of educators online. And I've also been able to be a part of curating space for educators online during trainings with lots of breakout rooms and interaction, and just watching these other unforeseen surprises happen for relationship building online. So that's one thing I want to say is that, denying force and like, how are we going to do this? And what does this look like or feel like or sound like? And then these people show up and this magic happens, right?
Mm.
Even though we're not in the same room together.
Mm.
Then I've been in trainings with teachers where I've been in small groups and we wore masks all day. And starting with check-ins has been a powerful way to help people bring the fear they're carrying in their body and the sadness or the anger, and just have a place to put it down in front of others and be held. And, I think the beautiful part about check-ins is, if you're kind of doing check-ins in a trauma-informed way, we're not fixing or replying, or we're just letting people have their true, authentic feelings. So what I'm getting at, James, is that working with teachers, and then I've worked in spaces with teachers where there's 100 of us and everybody's got masks on, and we do check-ins in small groups, socially distanced with masks on, and we're all eating hand sanitizer, right? Like, but you watch these tears and you watch their bodies and you see others lean in, and you witness folks who are not afraid hold space with people who are terrified of losing their lives by being on the front lines with kids. It's just incredible. And then after we do that, we seem to, in the small groups I've facilitated and in the really big groups I've facilitated face-to-face, it seems like after we do that, we just sit with each other, whatever your truth is, and we don't try and fix it. We just hold it next to our own. Then we can go in, right? And then what's fascinating to me is, even with the mask and it's hot and I've got premenopause and like, oh my gosh, I don't know. Magic and connection and life and truth and ideas and possibilities all lead into the greatest gift of all, which is hope, that together we'll move forward, right? And so, and I've sat with superintendents. I can honestly say I sit on leadership at my organization, and so I have space with superintendents, and really intimate space where it's closed groups, it's private, where I get to just really sit with leaders and kind of be a part of their journey. And at the August back to school kind of closed superintendent thing, I just remember watching our commissioner come in, and he's like this visionary, exciting guy, but this meeting was very sobering. And there was just this idea of logistics and our reality. And, I looked at superintendents that literally, James, they looked like they wanted to throw up. They looked physically ill. And then the next time we came back together, about 22 days later, some of them had started school with kids, and they did not look like that anymore. And the ones who hadn't yet started with kids still look like that. So isn't that fascinating, right? Like, there's all this fear leading up to, what if this goes wrong, right? Our brain starts trying to figure out all the ways we can troubleshoot the unknown, right? And then the ones that were in there with kids, it's like the kids get in the building, the teachers, and we just start moving forward together. And it is our relationships in all of our stories, in all of our struggles, in all of our trials as a human race, as a single mom. It is the people that make it possible for us to get up and do it another day, right? And so I just get so excited about the co-regulation piece, right? Because that's the force that moves us forward, right? It's always relationships. Relationships of honor, mutual respect, and curiosity. And believe me, I can sit here and say these things all the time, and I don't always show up like that, right? Like, there's times I show up pretty funky and with judgment, but I don't want that. I want more of the other, which is where I get to come into a space with you and just be curious, right? And so, I don't know. and our families. James, I get to work with poverty projects. We build them, and we're getting 2 more off the ground right now during COVID, right? We're raising money. The kingdom is producing money on the table to hire staff. We started one, we just got one off the ground a month and a half ago. 19 adults with like 25 kids showed up, and they're still showing up every week, dreaming about getting out of poverty and having the life that they deserve. And there's all these middle-class people who've been working in the background for a year that are coming into relationship with these families in poverty in their community, and their minds are just blown, just blown. And I'm watching healing occur, and for everybody involved, not just the families in poverty, right? Like, when you create an authentic space where people are signed on for transformation, that stuff is contagious. And it is that magic. It is that chemistry. It is that force that moves us forward. So we're not slowing down. We might be taking a couple detours to get to where we're trying to go, but there's these weird, like, little scenic stops on the detours that you're like, I had no idea that was over there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's exciting.
What keeps resounding for me, Rebecca, is relationship. We're relational beings, right? And we're not going to get into this, but you and I both know about the primal brain and the fight or flight and the fear that is playing out right now, and how we're constantly on the lookout for that. But then how life unfolds, like you said, with this August meeting with the superintendents and not knowing what's going to happen, so expecting the worst, and then realizing once they step into that space and the children come, that everything's kind of going to be okay, right? We're going to figure this out. And one of the beautiful things that I love that in the Poverty Project that you do is you actually, which is the most fascinating thing to me, is you bring people into relationship. You bring people that are in poverty together with people that are living a middle-class experience. And what you found is that they come to care for each other. And somehow the people with the middle-class experience are able to help those that might not have the tools or the skills or the access to thrive. And it sounds simple, but it's incredibly complex. But you've done it, and you've shown that it works. And so talk to me a little bit. So how did you get there, or what? Yeah, I don't think that's a good question. Not how did you get there. I think, I know your story. I know the journey you've been on, and you understand. I think you understand your story very well. And now you're able to take your story and listen to other people's stories and see where your story connects with theirs, and how it maybe can inform theirs, and how theirs informs you. How do you do that, Rebecca? And we talk about that at that gathering I brought you into, where we talk about the River of Cruelty, and how, as much as we have these different experiences, we're all one. And this is the magic that I think you tapped into, is you're able to bring people together as one.
James, one of the greatest lies and deceit of the human race is the us and them. Mm. And I have found very few people, if any, that at some point don't fall prey to that lie. I myself, I still do it too, and I don't want that in my body. I don't want that in my spirit. It's an interesting story, James. I was in college for almost 10 years, trying to get a 4-year degree to be a high school art teacher in the ghetto, in this middle-class university, private college with, I'm 30 something. I have a car that barely runs. I don't have enough money for a cell phone. I've got these 3 kids, and I'm with all these young girls, right, that are just fresh out of high school, want to be teachers. And we go to this cultural ethnicity kind of class and the idea of this class was you take a semester long class and you figure out who your sandpaper is, so that when you become a teacher and this type of kid shows up in your classroom, that you've worked through some of this prejudice, right? And the idea of the class was that we all have it, and if we don't confront it and work through it, then we will likely pass on that cruelty to children. And so, yeah, this is a great class in my mind, right? And, we dance around naming our sandpaper for, I don't know, we're probably almost to mid-semester. Had this powerful Black woman, she's a teacher, and anyway, and she probably had an idea that, I'm the only older lady in there, all these more than likely, mostly generationally middle-class white girls, right? So she takes me out in the hallway and she says, Rebecca, she says, because you had to identify your sandpaper, and then you had to go out over the next 2 weeks and intentionally spend time with your sandpaper and build relationships, right? And so she takes me out in the hallway and she says, Rebecca, who's your sandpaper, right? And I'm like, well, it's middle-class people. I said, primarily middle-class girls. And she's like, oh, well, your assignment's just to keep coming to class. And because that's what I was surrounded by, right? But I got in my car that day, in my crappy broken down car out in this university parking lot. And I just started talking out loud to God. And I said, God, I don't want to be this way. I don't want to be this person that has this grudge against this entire population of people for some stuff that happened to me in middle school. You have to help me, God. And it was a couple of months later, James, maybe weeks, I don't remember, that I, by accident, bumped up against this poverty project ran by middle-class people, middle-class women, to help families in poverty in my community get out. And boy, did I show up with a lot of judgment and suspicion, right? I was kind of expecting that, look at your life, look at your kids, here's where you're messed up, here's what we think you need to do to fix it. I went in with an attitude and a chip on my shoulder, and I knew what I was going to find in there. I was going to find the same old, same old. And boy, was I wrong. I found this incredible community of people who had obviously done some front loading, some culture work up front, who met me with this curiosity and this wonder and this excitement about my life and my story and my struggle. And they're like, we want to know. And we want to know more about all of you, because we haven't ever seen you before. And we've lived here all our lives, and so have you. And we're sorry. And we want to know what you guys think we should do. Like, what do you need? It's so simple, right? But all my walls dropped. And over the course of the next 6 months, I fell utterly in love with these women. And middle-class people tend to be a little more reserved. They tend to not put their dirt out on the table right away. But over the course of the next 2 years, I got incredibly close to these women, and I realized there's addictions in their stories, in their families. There's abuse. There's money problems. There's all this same stuff. There's fear. There's shame. There's inadequacies. And so remember, I'm in that parking lot of that college asking God, I don't want to be this way. You have to help me. And he threw me in the middle of something with people that were not my people. And so, my own personal journey of transformation from my judgment, my shame, my fear, my inability to understand how to stabilize my life and get out of survival mode, which isn't all that was going on, James, because there were some inabilities to understand how to access different thinking strategies that would help me in middle class, because in survival, in poverty, you need a certain set of rules to make it work. And they're important. Like, we should not judge those rules. People have to have those rules to stay alive. But I didn't have access to the other set of rules, but I also didn't have access. Because once I fell in love with these middle-class people and they fell in love with me, doors started to open, right? Because middle-class people typically have more access to the doorknobs to open certain doors, right? And through those relationships of mutual respect and authenticity, and curiosity. And they didn't give me money, James. They gave me time. And they gave me respect. And when they didn't understand something about my culture, they would ask instead of judge. And when I didn't understand something about their culture, I might have silently judged, but I learned to ask. Right.
Mm.
And so, that's again, another long answer there.
No, where it takes me, and we're coming to the end of our conversation, but I think where it takes me, Rebecca, is we're going through a really difficult but life-changing moment. And I think coming out of this, you're going to have a lot of people that are suffering, a lot of people that are going to lose their homes or have been losing their jobs, that are going into play, experiencing things that they've never had to experience before. And the people that are already there, it's only gotten worse for them. And so we have all these people that are going to be struggling, that are struggling, and that we don't understand that it's all kind of interconnected. Those people have children, and those children are struggling. Those children are coming into our classrooms, and the teachers that are in the classrooms are struggling. And so, but in everything you said to me and what you shared with us, which I hope people listen to, there's this hope and there's this power. So, and I don't want to name it. I want you to name it for us as we end our conversation. What is the hope, and where do you find the strength to connect with that source? From what I know of you, you inspire me, Rebecca. You're a woman of tremendous faith. You've overcome a great deal, like many of us. But your creativity, your imagination, your curiosity just keeps moving you forward, and it allows you to help others to tap into their light, right? So I want to stop. I'm talking too much, but where's the hope, and where's that source that you met?
The reason I think I got so excited about the trauma-informed movement, James, was not that it was about this bad stuff that happened to us and finally we had a way to talk about it and all that kind of stuff, but it was really about love.
Mm.
It was really about love and what love does to our bodies, and what love does to heal us. It's a balm. It's a healing energy, a healing property. And that there was hope, that our brains were not damaged or destroyed from adversity, that our brains want to heal and can heal and need safe, supportive, available relationships to do so. And, the great source of love for me is Jesus. And I mean, that's who it is, but it's not religion. It isn't. It's this force that's mysterious that I don't always understand. And I love my scripture, and most of the time I can't. It leads me some right, but it's love. It is a God that is love, unending for all people. And it isn't religion. It's a mystery. And, I wonder what it would be like if I could live more of a life that loved my creator and loved my fellow person. And if I loved those others in my mind that make me nuts and that I have so much judgment for, what would happen if I could love them? What would happen to my body and my story if I could love the oppressors in my mind, whoever they are for you? And that's the question I want to leave folks that might be listening with today is, who are the other for you? Who's the them? And what does it feel like in your body when you ask the question of, what would happen if I loved them? What would happen if I could love them? Because that's the deal. Somebody somewhere didn't have to, and they set a table before they knew me or my kids' names, and they said, when they show up, we're going to love them, and we'll figure out the rest later.
Thank you, Rebecca.
James, it's so good to spend time with you.
Of course.
Miss you.